Trump's new press secretary, Karoline Leavitt, walked confidently to the podium in a packed press room where reporters sat with notebooks open and cameras rolling. The room buzzed with tension as she adjusted the microphone and looked directly at the crowd of journalists. She began by addressing what she described as a clear double standard in media coverage. If a Republican stood here today and said we need to fight in the streets, you'd all be demanding resignations and investigations, maybe even arrests, she stated firmly. But when Ilhan Omar says it, suddenly it's just called a passionate plea for justice. Her words caused an immediate stir among the reporters, who shifted uncomfortably in their seats as they realized she was setting the tone for the briefing. Peter from CNN was the first to challenge her, asking if she was suggesting that Omar's comments were meant to incite violence. Karoline responded with a slight tilt of her head, "I'm not suggesting anything, Peter. I'm quoting her." "Or do you deny she said it?" When Peter hesitated, Karoline pressed further. "Let's be clear. When Democrats call for fighting in the streets, it's dismissed as just rhetoric. But when a Republican so much as breathes the wrong way, it's called a threat to democracy. So tell me, what's the rule here? Because from where I'm standing, it looks like the rules only apply to one side." The room fell silent as reporters struggled to formulate a response that wouldn't prove her point. When another reporter jumped in to suggest context matters, Karoline was quick to counter. "I love that word, context," she said with a hint of sarcasm. "Because when President Trump said, 'peacefully and patriotically make your voices heard,' you all conveniently ignored that context. In fact, you used it to try to throw him in jail." She paused to let her words sink in before continuing. "You want to talk about context?" Ilhan Omar didn't say peacefully and patriotically. She said, "We have to fight in the streets." So I'll ask again, why is it different? No one in the room seemed eager to answer that question, creating an uncomfortable silence. During the conference, a reporter's phone buzzed with a notification. When Karoline noticed and asked about it, the reporter reluctantly shared that Ilhan Omar had just tweeted about her. The tweet accused Karoline of spreading dangerous rhetoric to distract from Trump's reckless agenda. Karoline responded with a small chuckle. "That's cute, but her words are on video, plain as day, and she doesn't get to decide what's dangerous and what's not." The press corps sat in silence, aware that she had made a valid point, but uncertain how to acknowledge it without undermining their position. When later questioned about Trump's rhetoric leading to violence, Karoline turned the tables on the reporters. She pulled up her iPad and began showing examples of violence against Republicans. "This is Bernard Felix," she said, "just arrested for attacking a Republican volunteer, shouted that they deserve to die." She swiped to another image. "This man firebombed a GOP office, told police he was following orders." With another swipe, she continued, "And this is the man who shot a Republican congressman on a baseball field." Looking directly at Peter from CNN, she asked pointedly, "So tell me, do these count as real-world consequences, or does political violence only matter when it fits your narrative?" The visible discomfort in the room showed that her question had hit its mark. The conversation then shifted to Elon Musk when James from the Washington Post asked about his appointment to lead the Department of Government Efficiency, suggesting it was simply rewarding a billionaire ally. Karoline almost laughed. "Oh, so now you all care about billionaires influencing government? That's funny because I don't remember any of you complaining when Mark Zuckerberg was spending $400 million to influence elections, or when Jeff Bezos was receiving billions in government contracts while owning a newspaper that conveniently never criticizes the left." When pressed about the oversight concerns with Musk having access to government systems, Karoline leaned in and clarified, "Let's get our facts straight, James. The DOJ engineers Musk is working with only have read-only access to Treasury systems. They cannot write new code." She added with emphasis, "And let's be honest, what really bothers you isn't Musk having oversight. It's that he's actually going to expose how much taxpayer money has been wasted." The discussion became even more heated when the topic turned to Gaza. James from the Washington Post asked how the administration justified telling Palestinians they had to leave Gaza when they considered it their home. Karoline remained composed, stating that the president's goal was simple: rebuild Gaza, ensure peace, prevent another war. She then pointed out what she saw as media hypocrisy. The media keeps asking what Trump is doing, but never asked why Gaza is in ruins in the first place. Why is Gaza unlivable today? Because Hamas, a terrorist group backed by Iran, launched a brutal attack on Israel. They slaughtered civilians, took hostages, and used Palestinians as human shields. When pressed about whether the U.S. would force Palestinians to leave Gaza, Karoline firmly stated, "No, the U.S. is not forcing anyone out. We are prepared to help rebuild, but we will not allow another Hamas-controlled war zone to emerge." When James pushed about the president's willingness to use military force if necessary, Karoline carefully clarified, "The president has not committed to U.S. boots on the ground, but he's keeping all options open because when it comes to national security, he won't play political games." She then posed a question that no one seemed eager to answer. The real question is, why aren't you asking Hamas to surrender? Throughout the briefing, Karoline repeatedly called out what she perceived as media misrepresentation of her words. When a CNN reporter claimed she had suggested illegal immigrants don't deserve humane treatment, she challenged him to quote her exactly. When he admitted he didn't have the direct quote, she pulled up the transcript herself. "I said illegal immigration is a national security crisis, and the Biden administration's policies have made it worse." Looking directly at the reporter, she asked, "Where exactly did I say anything about immigrants not deserving humane treatment?" She also highlighted an MSNBC headline that read, "Karoline Leavitt refuses to deny Trump will use U.S. troops to remove Palestinians," when she had clearly stated, "The president has not committed to U.S. boots on the ground, but is keeping all options open to maintain stability." She confronted the room. "This is how it works. The media creates a false story, spreads it across every platform, and hopes people never fact-check it." The tension reached its peak when the press tried to shift the focus to Trump's rhetoric. James from the Washington Post pointed out that Trump had a history of using strong, even inflammatory language, calling political opponents enemies and saying, "We need to fight back hard." Karoline responded by asking, "You mean the same way Ilhan Omar told her supporters to fight in the streets? Or the way Chuck Schumer threatened Supreme Court justices, saying they would pay the price?" She called out what she saw as a clear double standard. When Democrats use aggressive rhetoric, you call it passionate advocacy. But when Trump says something strong, you call it incitement. To drive her point home, she displayed headlines about Trump that used phrases like violent rhetoric, threat to democracy, and dangerous speech, contrasting them with headlines about Omar that used much softer language like passionate speech, highlights political divide, and urges Americans to fight for justice. Looking up from her iPad, she asked simply, "Spot the difference." When reporters tried to change the subject, Karoline refused to let them off easily. "Oh, so now we want to talk about the economy? Now that the Ilhan Omar scandal is blowing up on Twitter, you all suddenly want to pivot," she remarked as reporters glanced nervously at their phones, seeing the backlash unfold in real time. In her final moments at the podium, when asked about the administration causing division in the country, Karoline delivered her most pointed critique. "That's the biggest lie the media has ever sold the American people. You call Trump divisive, but who spent the last 8 years telling half the country their faith is outdated and their values are a threat to democracy? The media doesn't fear Trump. They fear what he represents because he proves something that terrifies them. They don't control the people anymore." After letting those words sink in, Karoline simply checked her watch, straightened her papers, and walked calmly away from the podium. Reporters shouted questions after her and cameras flashed, but she never looked back, leaving the press room to deal with the aftermath of what had just transpired.